What is the creepiest missing person case you know about? The disappearance of Fred Valenich. He was a pilot who set off from a Melbourne airport on a training exercise over Bass Strait. He never arrived at King Island. What makes it creepy that he radioed in that there was a strange craft following him and the last piece of communication was a metallic scraping sound. Experts said that he was disorientated and was flying upside down and seeing the lights from his own craft on the water. But the Cessna he was flying could only fly upside down for a few seconds before stalling. They have never found him or his craft. The case of J.C. Lee Duggart has always fascinated and mortified me. 11-year-old girl kidnapped on her way to school in 1991. In 2009, she turns up alive. Turns out, married couple kidnapped her and kept her in a series of sheds in their backyard for 18 years as a sex slave. During this time, the man impregnated her twice and she had 2 kids, 11 and 15, when the 3 of them were finally rescued. These kids had never seen the outside world and all they knew were what she was able to teach them with her own limited knowledge. Thankfully, she was reunited with her parents and last known to be focusing on raising her kids and generally staying as private as possible with her life. One of the most chilling ones is Nathaniel Bar-Jonah. He was a convicted pedophile and suspected serial killer/cannibal. He frequently impersonated police officers and attempted to lure children away from their homes. He was eventually arrested, but a judge ruled that the state had failed to prove that Bar-Jonah posed a public threat, so he was released, despite having told psychiatrists that he had a fascination of cannibalism. Not long after his release, a 10-year-old boy was reported missing. Witnesses claimed that they had seen him in an alleyway, waiting for somebody. Another witness saw him being followed by an obese man matching Bar-Jonah's description, and the boy was distressed. The boy disappeared somewhere in that alleyway and was never seen again. When the police searched Bar-Jonah's apartment, they found a list of names. The list included the names of his previous victims, as well as the missing boy followed by the word, "died," in all caps. They also found newspaper clippings regarding the case all over his apartment. A former flatmate of Bar-Jonah's reportedly found clothes in the apartment which matched the ones the missing boy was wearing on the day he went missing. A notebook was also discovered with coded writing. It took months for the police and FBI to crack the code, but eventually they managed it. Bar-Jonah had written in-depth descriptions of cannibalism, as well as cooking recipes involving the body parts of children. The recipe titles included little boy pot pie and roasted child. Despite weighing over 300 pounds and known to have a large appetite, police found that he had not made any significant food purchases for almost a month after the missing boy's disappearance. During this time, he frequently held barbecues for his neighbors, who mentioned frequently that the meat he was serving tasted strange. Police later found a meat grinder in his apartment, which contained human DNA. The police were never able to connect Bar-Jonah to the missing boy, and they never found the identity of the DNA from the meat grinder. Maybe not a missing person case, but one of the most disturbing things I've ever heard. Missing pregnant woman in my town. Can't find her anywhere. She put up an ad on Craigslist for other pregnant women to hang out with and to get advice from. Only one person responded and they became really great friends. They were friends for a couple months and one day she just goes missing for about a week. Suddenly, someone sees a woman laying on the side of the road, gets pulled out and laid in a neat pile. So fresh there's still steam. Dental records prove it is the pregnant woman, but there's no baby to be seen anywhere. Turns out the friend had cut out her baby and brought it to the hospital claiming to have had the baby in her car. What tipped them off was that instead of a placenta, like the woman thought, the woman had brought pregnant lady's ovaries instead. Edit: I'm replying to everyone I can, but I had a few things wrong. 1. She made friends with her on Facebook and not Craigslist. 2nd, this lady took the baby and various organs to a friend's house before going to the hospital. Either way, absolutely terrible crime. A girl in my grade, when I was in grade 6, was reportedly missing after having an argument with her mom in the parking lot of a grocery store. Security cameras were checked and they found out the mother had lied about that. After several days we found out that the mom had strangled her with twine, pulled her pants off to make her look like she was raped, and threw her by a lake. Disturbing stuff. There were only about 30 people in my grade, so it was a close-knit community. Edit: it turns out it was because the mom's boyfriend at the time gave her an ultimatum. Great guy. This one is heart-wrenching. I was so absorbed in it when it was still going on, but it's been a while since I looked into it. Apparently Susan went missing and her husband said he took his kids late night camping, leaving in the middle of the night and returning the next day. In the middle of winter. And his wife was gone when he returned. So much points to him murdering her. Her phone and belongings were still at home. Her family didn't hear from her, She had made it clear that if something happened to her, her husband was responsible. He had been abusive and possessive. Oh, and a large wet spot on the carpet with a fan blowing on it when police arrived. Oh, and the kids saying they knew they'd never see their mom again, that she wasn't around when they were awoken in the middle of the night and put into the front seat of the van to go camping. Very, very sad ending, where it came out that the husband's father was involved with child pornography and the husband never being charged. He moved the kids out of state eventually and exploded the house they were living in, with all three of them inside. As far as I remember, no closure on Susan being found, no body, no justice, no answers. It baffles me. My daughter stopped in the same spot every day while walking home from school. Then my wife or I would pick her up. I argued and eventually convinced them that it was not okay. She needed to either stay at school or walk home. About a couple days later, a car was stopped across the street. Two guys, older teenagers, hanging out, doors open, listening to music. When my daughter was across the street, one of the guys started sprinting towards her. She ran, guy stopped chasing after about a block. She told me about this and I thought it was nothing, just teenagers screwing with a little kid. Then she told me that when the one guy started chasing her, the other guy turned the music up loud, blasting it. That made my blood run cold. It was no longer a couple guys screwing around, it was someone who noticed her pattern and had a plan. Sorry for the obligatory, this story isn't exactly what was asked for, but it haunts me. Edit, our neighborhood is a little removed, no outside traffic comes through, and it isn't likely the people who tried to abduct her were from around here. Which raises an unanswerable question or two. Oh, boy. Here we go. I went missing when I was young when I wandered away from our townhouse in southeastern Michigan. It was an area known for its gang violence, but rarely any kidnappings. This day, there was a string of kidnappings that had been going on for a month. I was going to the woods to play with sticks and do dumb 4-year-old things, and I saw a man and a teenage girl start asking one of my neighbor's kids, who was 3 at the time, if he wanted some free toys. He went inside and told his parents, who called the cops, and they got frustrated and went into the woods. Then they saw me. They didn't try to trick me, though, they just chased me. I hid up in a tree for at least 10 hours. The cops found me after the couple had been arrested. I'm kinda late to the party, so this will get buried, but we had half a dozen kids, mostly teens, disappearing a couple of years ago in Portugal. Turns out they were all killed and the killer had been texting their families from the victims' phones telling them they were okay and moving away from Portugal. They were obviously dead by then. If I recall correctly, some of the bodies were fed to pigs or something like that, one of which was apparently pregnant of twins. In the end, he was sentenced for 500 plus counts of rape of minors, kidnap, murder, etc., but that's not what creeps me out. What creeps me out was the whole character that he was. He lived in a slummy castle he built for himself. He called himself Ray Gob, King Gob, and he thought he was a wizard with mystical powers. He has multiple YouTube videos where he's with kids/teens predicting future apocalypses. Turns out he told the kids he had mystical energies and the only way to save them was to transfer the energy through, obviously, sexual intercourse. If you see his house/videos, you really get a over-the-top vibe, like a 70s slasher horror movie like The Hills Have Eyes or Resident Evil 7 or something like that. This is the house where the murders took place. This is his YouTube channel. He speaks in Portuguese, but don't mind that, as he mostly says only shit, so you're not missing on a lot of content. It's too bad this gets buried, as I think this would make a good story. Long Island serial killer is an active serial killer in the United States who's believed to work in a nursery or something with access to burlap sacks. One of his victims was an escort off Craigslist. He got her contacts off her phone and called her sister on a burner phone and asked if it was indeed her sister. She said yes, and he replied, "Do you know your sister is a whore?" Then he ended the call. That's literally the only contact they've had with him. They think he's killed around 15, and they're still not close to finding him. Unfun fact, the FBI estimates there's about 50 active serial killers in the United States at any time. It's better than in the 70s, though. Back then there was estimated to be 500 active at any time. A girl I went to school with disappeared in junior high. She had some drug issues and ran with a rough crowd, so the police decided that she ran away despite finding a puddle of blood in her bedroom. At school we were told she ran away, and if we knew where she was, to tell someone. The first few days no one really talked about it. Then when we came back to school after the weekend, we all started hearing rumors that there was a house party over the weekend and that her body was on display in the bathtub as a warning to others not to mess with this particular drug dealer. The police continued to insist she ran away. right up to the day her body was found on the bank of the river. Suddenly it was a murder investigation. The girl's mother has not been shy about saying that the police bungled the investigation. They know exactly who did it, but no one will talk, and key evidence was lost or improperly gathered. I find it extraordinarily creepy that someone in our community killed her and showed her body off in a bathtub. Not to mention all these kids that saw the body and never went to the police. 22 years later and everyone involved is still too scared to speak up. Disappearance of Mark Kilroy. In 1989, I was 19 years old, lived in Austin, Texas. I was in college at the University of Texas. It was spring break and a large group of us went to South Padre Island for a week. You would basically spend the day at the beach, but at night, everyone would drive to Brownsville, park your car and walk across the border into Mexico. The drinking age was lower and the booze was cheap. The town we went to was Matamoros. My friend and I drank a lot and then made the walk back to our car in Brownsville. When we got back to Austin, it was all over the news that another kid who also went to University of Texas was missing. He had gone to Matamoros with two friends. They got separated in the crowd and could not find him. A few months later, his body was found in some creepy ranch in Mexico. He had been decapitated, legs cut off and some of his internal organs put into a boiling pot. It turned out some dude who was into Santeria abducted him and killed him as a human sacrifice to give him powers to protect the drug cartels from getting caught by police. They believed this guy had special powers, so they would pay him money to perform spells to keep them safe. He claimed to get his powers from human sacrifice. You can't make this shit up. Google Mark Kilroy, Austin, Texas, and you will find the whole story. It haunts me to this day that my friend and I were probably drinking at one of the same bars as him on the night he was abducted. We were two 19-year-old girls, drunk, walking around Mexico at night. No cell phones back then. We never told our parents we went to Mexico. They thought we stayed at South Padre Island the whole time. The two Dutch girls who got lost in the jungle in Panama. Went for a day hike, didn't turn back and apparently got lost deep in the forest during the rainy season. Creepiest thing is that their phones were discovered in a backpack downriver, fully intact. Along with a camera that had photos. Normal, happy photos of them on the trail taken just an hour before their internal phone records showed they started trying to call 911, or equivalent, for help. And 90 other photos taken in the rainy darkness in the middle of the night, between 1 and 4 a.m., a week after they disappeared, methodically showing a cliff and some bushes and some impromptu markers made of what little things they had brought with them. Fragments of their bodies, bones, and a boot with a foot still in it, were found a couple months later, but nobody really knows for sure how they died. Accident on the trail? Fell into the rapids? Murdered and then someone was playing with their phones? This story creeped me out big time. Many years ago when I was in the Navy, I was in the lobby of the barracks when one of my shipmates got off the phone with his mom. He looked kinda freaked out, so I asked him what was up. He told me this story. He was from some small farming town in Kansas. A few years prior to him joining the Navy, there had been a murder in their town. A young couple and their two little kids lived on the outskirts of the town. One day the man didn't show up for work, and no one answered the phone. Police were sent to the house where they discovered the mom and two kids brutally murdered. The dad was nowhere to be found and was assumed to be the killer. 6 months or so go by with no leads, then one day a nearby farmer out plowing his fields finds a human head. It was the dad. The case went cold. Flash forward to the day in the lobby. His mom called to tell him the case had been solved. A few weeks prior, a young teenage girl in Los Angeles escaped from a Satanist cult that had held her captive since she was kidnapped by them as a little girl. She had been forced to participate in countless satanic ritual murders all across the country. Through photos, she positively ID'd the family in Kansas as one of the murders she had been forced to commit. They never caught the cult members. So a lawyer disappeared in my city, Duque de Caxias, Rio de Janeiro State, Brazil. He was a cousin of a guy I knew from high school and he was posting a lot about it on Facebook. Meanwhile, I used to pass right in front of this very badly kept building in my way to my psychologist once per week and noticed there was now a wall in the top floor from which I could see a fan. Didn't pay much attention to which. Some time later, police following an anonymous call found the missing lawyer had been killed by one of his clients because of a debt and the killer lived in that building. He has hidden the body in a gap between two walls and the hole with the fan was there because it was starting to smell and he was trying to vent the smell out. There is something very creepy for me from thinking that I was walking just below where the body was for months and has no idea, all while the guy's family were going crazy after him. I'm sure this will be buried, but I'm still posting it. Mark Bakotic II, 21, disappeared outside of a New Orleans nightclub on December 30, 2016. He and his friends had been at an EDM show and had taken a fairly obscure hallucinogen called 2CE, and from all accounts the trip was not going well. Mark grew paranoid, didn't know who he was, and ran away from his friends. He had a blotter sheet of 2CE in his pants pocket. It stormed shortly after he ran away. The thing is, when 2CE gets wet, it's possible to be absorbed through the skin, giving him a massive dose all at once. As far as we know, Mark is still wandering around New Orleans somewhere. He had been spotted in the neighborhood he disappeared in up to 3 months after he disappeared. The theory is that the massive dose of 2CE he accidentally ingested caused a psychotic break and that he has no idea who he is. If he is still alive, he is likely very paranoid. There is a good chance that the missing persons posters meant to help find him have chased him away from the people searching for him. The thought of him wandering around New Orleans scared, alone and not knowing who or what he is for the last 7 months terrifies me. The Sauter family kids. The Sauter family house caught fire under suspicious circumstances. The mother received a strange call Christmas Eve, almost like someone was checking to see if there were people at home. She then went to bed, but heard a strange noise on the roof. Then the fire started and the family was unable to get some of the younger kids out of the house. After the fire, it was discovered that the phone line had been cut. None of the bodies of the kids who supposedly died in the fire were found. Some animal carcasses were later found in the burnt-up rubble of the house. A policeman later admitted that he planted the carcasses to give the family closure. The father had gotten into arguments with members of the local mafia. The family believed the kids were alive, and the mother received a strange letter and call from people claiming to be her kids years later. Here's a podcast that goes into more detail. This particular case was my sibling's father's girlfriend. She just disappeared, and my sibling's father claimed that they broke up and he hadn't seen her since, but my siblings remember seeing her purse or something at his house after her disappearance, but they were young children and probably never interviewed by police. When he was married to my mom, prior to this case, he was very highly abusive and threatening. He would commonly tell my mom things like they'd never find your body or I would get away with it. The case has been cold for over 20 years, not a single lead. I know he did it. My siblings know he did it. My mom knows he did it. But there's no way to prove any of it. In Michigan, I worked at a quality diary, and there was this family that came in every day. A mom and dad and some foster kids. A few years later, the son came up missing. Mom and dad and the whole town spent days looking for him. Weeks. No leads. Nothing. Until it finally came out that the mom and dad knew where he was. In a garbage bag in a ditch on the side of the road. After questioning, and all that comes with knowing where your dead child is, it came out that the mom hit him in the head with a hammer, killing him. Dad helped hide it. Little boy was 7 to 8 years old. Another, my cousin, was kidnapped by his mother's boyfriend, not his dad, when he was 3. There were some mental issues with the mom's boyfriend. The town searched and couldn't find him. They pulled the boyfriend into the police station for questioning. Meanwhile, outside, a police officer hears an odd noise coming from a parked car. The boyfriend's car. He breaks into the trunk to find my cousin wrapped up in trash bags, alive, wearing nothing but a soiled diaper. It was winter in Michigan. Lastly, my uncle had a baby with his girlfriend. At 3 months old, they left her with her uncle, the mom's brother, so they could go out. They get home and discover what looks like a break-in. They wake the brother and he doesn't seem to know what is going on. Police get called. For 3 days they search and question everyone. Finally, the brother caves. He killed the baby, wrapped her in grocery bags, walked around town, and eventually buried her under the wood chips in the neighbor's backyard. Autopsy shows she was also molested. The most unsettling thing to me about this is that while everyone was searching, my grandma stopped more than once and looked at that pile of wood chips because she felt something. But no one ever checked under it. It didn't look disturbed. I know I'm way late to the party on this one, but I thought I would share anyway since it wasn't on here. In September 1987, Julie Weflin was routinely checking a power substation for work. She was abducted at the substation outside of her work vehicle. There were signs of a struggle and other car tire marks as well. The driver's door was left open and her sunglasses and hard hat were left on the ground. To this day, nor her body or remains have never been found. This is so fond to me because her husband was very close with my dad. So my dad has rehashed a few details that one can't easily find on Google. The detective believed her husband to be a primary suspect for about a week until they dismissed that theory because he was so incredibly distraught. The case got national media attention, Her face was put on billboards from Canada to California, and still nothing has been found to this day. My dad has told me the investigators had/have a very strong idea of who it was because of the suspect's history, but were never able to dig any reason up to take this person in or search their property. It just amazes me how something like that can happen without any traceability. So many lives were affected. If you guys like this video, please drop a like and subscribe, and also check out my Instagram account Scary Time that is linked in the description below. And as always, stay scary.